half a century, conventional wisdom said resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was key to sustainable peace in the greater Middle East. Does that wisdom still hold true today?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to have that discussion. You know, as you said, for 50+ years, the players in the Middle East always used to point to the cause and the plight of the Palestinian crisis, the Palestinian sort of the core of the of this particular group of people in the middle of the Middle East. And so the older generation, if you look at from Hosni Mubarak to the former leader of Libya, to Saddam Hussein, all of these stalwarts of the region were constantly using the plight of the Palestinians to say the only way we can bring long-lasting peace is that these two parties, the Israelis and the Palestinians, would come together, solve their issues, create perhaps a two-state solution, and that this was the sort of the nexus, the pivotal point that would bring and usher in peace, lasting peace in the region. Well, we have seen in the last 25 years, much of which I have covered in terms of the wars, whether it's the Iraq-Iran war, whether it's the Syrian devastating war that crippled that nation, whether it was the insurgency, the replacement of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and then the ensuing calamity, the chaos that ensued in Iraq. You can ask the question, John, were all of these problems, all of these wars as a result, as a direct relation to the Israelis and Palestinians not coming together? Obviously not. What you have today is a younger generation that are saying, listen, we have seen millions of people in Syria displaced. We have seen hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Sudan, in Yemen, in all of these other places of the Middle East where there is war and convulsions. And we're saying, we are not seeing an end to this problem. We have got to rethink. We have got to say, can we change the calculus? Can we change the narrative that perhaps our parents and grandparents were talking about and say, how can we build a brighter future? How can we build nations where they are hopeful about the future? And what you're seeing today is that these two Arab countries, the UAE and Bahrain, are saying to themselves, listen, we want to forge a different kind of future for our nations. And if that means that we will come into alignment and have peace with our Jewish neighbor, would have peace with the Israelis, that perhaps eventually that peace will come and eventually they can begin to, even have a serious discussion about a two-state solution. So what's interesting is that for many, many years, 50+ years, the calculus was that peace would come from within the Israelis and the Palestinians. What you're seeing today is that the peace is coming from Israel's Arab nations. And, now you have the UAE and Bahrain. And as this accord says, it's called, incidentally, John, is called the Abraham Accords. That is not by mistake. It is absolutely very, very deliberate. Why? Because it makes reference to the Abrahamic faiths in the region. You've got Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. These three faith groups coming together to try and bring lasting peace to the region. And that's what we're seeing today.
George, real quickly, I want you to stand by. I just want to, for our viewers, kind of narrate what's happening. You're seeing a live picture from the White House South Lawn where hundreds are gathered for this White House signing ceremony. As George just mentioned, it is called colloquially the Abraham Accords to recognize the three faith traditions, the Abrahamic faith traditions. Of course, the White House, the president will be there. There will be delegations from both the UAE and from Bahrain, and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. George, previous administrations, as we have talked about, have tried and failed to bring peace to the Middle East. We're still far from widespread peace, but is this a sign of major change? George, how did the Trump administration pull this off?
Yeah, as you mentioned, previous U.S. administrations have been trying for 50+ years to get the two sides, get the Israelis and the Palestinians to the negotiating table. They have in the past, but it has failed because both sides wanted various things. They had different agendas, and they brought those agendas to the table. Let me just bring our viewers to speed as to what the Abraham Accord actually does from a tangible standpoint. What this means for the UAE and Bahrain and Israel, it means that for the very first time, both countries will exchange embassies, they will exchange ambassadors. In the process of signing bilateral agreements, this means they will have direct tourism exchange, they will have direct flights from Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi, from, cooperations in terms of security, technology, healthcare, tourism, as I mentioned, telecommunications. This is major. And it's interesting because one of the major players in all of this has been the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And he made the comment soon after the United States, after his father-in-law made the announcement that the UAE and Israel had signed this peace agreement. He said, for the longest time, we couldn't solve problems that have gone unsolved by doing it the same way. You have tried and failed, and it is time to do something different. And that's clearly what happened. I think in many ways, this particular White House saw the elements at play. The end of the Syrian war, some kind of semblance of peace in Iraq, and a part of the world that was aching, was yearning for a hopeful future. And Jared and his team and other advisors that have been working behind the scenes for such a long time said, listen, guys, this is a monumental opportunity. Let's seize the opportunity and let's say, can we come together? Can we put aside our differences for the moment and bring a semblance of peace and exchange ideas, exchange technology, whether military, economic, bilateral, cultural, economic, religious, and all of these areas. And I think the players there was a sense that this was the right time to do it. And I think what you're going to see is next in line could be Oman, Sudan, Kuwait, and obviously then the big one would be the biggest country in the region of significance would be Saudi Arabia.
That would be a sure major change. George, is today's peace agreement a sign that a new generation of leaders in the Arab world is emerging who have a different view, not only of Israel, but the kind of future that they'd like to build?
Absolutely. You know, what's very interesting, when the White House announced this 2 weeks ago in relation to Israel and the UAE signing this peace agreement, the one group, one organization that I was looking to see what kind of reaction they would have was the Arab League. Keep in mind, John, the Arab League has for 50+ years always stuck to this mantra that the only way to bring peace to the Middle East is that the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict, the impasse would be solved. That's the only way that they can achieve peace. When the Arab League did not condemn the Israelis and the Emiratis, the UAE coming together, that was, to me, that sent a shockwave. Why? Because it sends a shockwave to the Palestinian leadership to say, because the Palestinians used their plight to try to galvanize the Middle East against Israel. Well, when the UAE and Israel signed the peace deal and the Arab League said to the Palestinians, listen, we used to think this way for half a century. We're going another approach. We are going to sign on and we're going to applaud this agreement between the UAE and then subsequently between Israel and Bahrain. And obviously the Palestinian leadership has to be saying to themselves, are we feeling isolated? Can we no longer use our plight as a whipping boy against Israel, so to speak, politically? And the fact that the Arab League decided to applaud and to welcome not just the UAE agreement, peace deal, but also with Bahrain, I think is a very, very important signal to the Palestinians that a new leadership has to emerge within the Palestinian political body in terms of creating a future that is viable, hopeful, hope-filled, and brings economic prosperity. And as you mentioned, what's happening today, whether it's Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Sudan. I mean, look at the changes that are happening, my goodness, that are happening in Sudan. Omar al-Bashir, the dictator, the brutal dictator who ruled Sudan for 20, 30 plus years, suddenly the streets of Khartoum were demanding that he relinquish his power, and they wanted a new system of justice. And what's interesting is that Sudan, which is predominantly a Muslim nation, the people of Sudan said, we don't want a government, a next government, that wants to base its governance on Islam, on Sharia law, which was huge. That's huge. What it means is that, John, in the Middle East today and in this part of the world, there is a new generation of leaders who are technologically savvy. They're jet-setting around the world. They have access to wealth. I mean, they always have had that access, but they realize that their walls between the nations are coming down, and the exchange, the free flow of exchange of ideas, of culture, of economy, of technology, of healthcare has to happen. But as long as we continue to isolate ourselves and use the Jewish state, use the Israelis as an excuse for keeping our people back, that is not working. We have got to try something new.
George, a new generation ushering new times in the Middle East. Senior international correspondent George Thomas, stick around.
Sure.
We don't want you to go anywhere.
Okay.
We appreciate your insights, but we are waiting for the ceremony at the White House to get underway. I understand they are a few minutes delayed. We'll continue to monitor as the event begins. For now, though, we'll return to regular CBN News programming. We'll be back for more special coverage once this historic signing ceremony starts. Thanks for watching this special coverage. Stick around.
You've been watching special live coverage from the CBN News Channel. We now return you to scheduled programming already in progress.
back in a minute.
And welcome back to the CBN News live coverage, and a special thank you to our YouTube audience. We invite all of you to subscribe to the CBN News YouTube channel. You are watching special coverage of the historic peace deal signing at the White House. We are joined now back with George Thomas from our Virginia Beach headquarters. George, just real quickly, though, let's kind of narrate what we're seeing. Sure. You're seeing a picture of the White House South Lawn. This is where the signing ceremony between the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Israel is supposed to take place. It is also the site of the 1993 Oslo agreements. George, we want to talk about what we're seeing here today and those, of course, who support this peace deal, but there are also a group who oppose it. We know the Palestinians condemn the brokered deal. There's video out that shows Bahrainis marching against the deal. I want to know how divisive is this move among the people in the Arab world versus those who support it amongst governments?
Well, let's look at when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu walked into the Oval Office a few minutes after noon Eastern time. The President of the United States presented him with a gold key saying that it was the key to the White House. Prime Minister Netanyahu responded to the president saying, you have the key to the hearts of the Jewish people. And one of the reporters asked him, does Israel feel isolated as a result of these peace agreements? And he said, in Netanyahu's words, quote, heck no. And then continued to say that Tehran is under tremendous pressure. So when you ask the question, who is opposing this deal? Well, the usual suspects come to mind. The Ayatollahs in Tehran, in Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, Turkey's President Erdogan, Recep Erdogan, because you have to keep in mind, why is what we're seeing significant? Is because for 50-plus years, these Arab countries, including the UAE, including Bahrain, and other countries, used the issue of the Palestinian plight to whip up sentiment against the Jewish state. And in fact, when you look at ISIS, Al-Qaeda, you go down the alphabet soup of terrorist organizations that have existed for 50-plus years, they have always pointed to the friction between the Palestinians and the Israelis as their cause celeb. In essence, to use that issue to foment radical Islam, to foment extremism, to foment terrorist attacks, not just against Israelis and the Jewish state, but the United States and all of our interests around the world. And so you have these usual suspects who want to continue: Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Turkey, who want to use this issue, hoping that they can continue to use this as a way to foment hatred, their ongoing hatred against the Jewish state. But clearly, the tide is turning in this case, as we see. In fact, the president, during his meeting in the Oval Office with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a reporter was asked, do you have any other countries that are going to be signing a deal in the not-too-distant future? And the president, according to him, said that we are very far down the road. We have 5 additional countries. Obviously, he did not mention which countries those would be, but I would suspect countries like maybe Oman, Kuwait, Sudan on the list to take note of, and obviously the big country in the Middle East would be Saudi Arabia. But again, I think the tide is turning. It doesn't mean, now let's be very careful, it doesn't mean that peace is suddenly going to ensue and blanket the wide swath of the Middle East. No, what this means is that it is serving notice to the leaders of these other Arab countries to say, listen, it's time for us to try something different. Keep in mind the leader of the UAE, of the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed. He's 59 years old. Why is that important? Because for the longest time, the previous leaders, they would last into their 80s, their 90s, and they would have this old mentality and looking at the issue of the Palestinian cause. Mohammed bin Salman, the young crown prince of Saudi Arabia, at the ripe old age of 35, is a good friend and ally of the UAE leader. You better believe that Prince Mohammed bin Zayed is putting pressure on the young crown prince of Saudi Arabia to say, hey, listen, maybe it will send shockwaves across the Middle East if Saudi Arabia can make a peace deal with Israel. That will be monumental. Obviously, it would be huge, because in the end, it behooves the Israelis to try and create these relationships with their Arab neighbors to say, listen, we can talk about a potential two-state solution, but as long as we have the countries that surround the Jewish state that are at peace with us and we don't feel threatened by them, then we can talk about a Palestinian statehood. Remember, when President Trump went to Riyadh back in 2017, and he had a chance to address more than 50 Arab leaders and as well as Muslim leaders, he said to them, he encouraged them, listen, now is the time to fight, number one, Islamic extremism. Now is the time to fight poverty amongst your people. Now is the time to forge a brighter future. And we want the Arab nations to make peace with Israel. Now, obviously, that was back in 2017. It took some time. It took a lot of time because you're talking about backdoor negotiations and diplomacy. What's interesting in all of this, in the so-called Abraham Accord, is that this accord, as opposed to, you mentioned back in 1993, that very setting at the White House lawn was the signing of the Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords, we'll all remember, it was a public event. There was so much spotlight on the Oslo Accords. What is unique, in my opinion, about the Abraham Accords is that a lot of this was done behind the scenes. And it was almost like a sudden surprise when a few weeks ago that the White House, that the Trump administration announced that the United Arab Emirates and Israel were going to sign a peace deal. And then about a week later, Bahrain joined that team as well.
George, and it's hard to believe that that was August 13th that the White House made that announcement. I think this journey, it's important to remind our audience about the journey. It was in 1948 that the modern state of Israel was formed. Shortly thereafter, there was the Arab-Israeli War. In 1979, though, the first state, Gulf state, to declare peace with Israel was Egypt. It wasn't until 1994 that Jordan became the second state. Last month, the president announced that the United Arab Emirates was joining that faction of states brokering peace with Israel. And then within a matter of less than a month, Bahrain became the fourth. And as you just mentioned, through that White House poll report, the president saying that there are 5 more additional nations in tow. George, the key player, as you just mentioned, in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia, which reportedly signed off on these deals. What's the likelihood of an agreement between Israel and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? And if it were achieved, what impact could that have on the broader region?
Well, to your second question first, it would be monumental. It would change the calculus. It would change the dynamics of the Middle East. It will bring a greater level of economic prosperity to the region. Keep in mind, Israel now, for the first time, something that they've been wanting for a very long time. As you mentioned, the last country, the last Gulf state, the last Arab country to make a peace deal with Israel was Jordan. That was a long time ago. Egypt, as you said, back in 1979. So Israel has been looking, they've been itching for a partner in the Arab world to make peace with. Because with the signing of a peace deal, what this means, as I mentioned earlier in the show, what this means is that Israel now has, for the first time, access to the UAE market. I have been to the UAE on numerous occasions. It is a prosperous, economically thriving island nation in the middle of the Persian Gulf. It is booming economically, and so Israel wants access to that market. It wants access to the market in Bahrain and other Arab nations. You know, keep in mind, you have to understand, as somebody who has covered the various civil wars, the various conflicts over the last 25 years in that region, I'm not that old, by the way. But the point is that, you know, when you go to the so-called Arab street and you mention about the Jewish state, you mention about Jewish people and Israel, immediately there's a fear, because they have been for decades been told that Israel is the enemy, that they should not make friends, they should not have business relationships. And so there was always this apprehension to look at the Jewish state as a friend. It was always considered an enemy. And so today what you're seeing on the streets of the UAE, in Bahrain and other places, is an opportunity to make relations with this once nation that was considered for decades, perhaps even for generations, as an evil country. It's an opportunity for them to reach across the sort of political as well as religious divide and to join in partnership economically, militarily, from a healthcare, all technological aspects. Now, keep in mind, you know, let's not kid ourselves. There are clearly actors on the scene, whether in Saudi Arabia. You mentioned, you know, the implication of a Saudi deal with Israel. Trust me, there are elements within Saudi Arabia that still holds on to a very radical interpretation of Islam based on Sharia law that still looks at the Jewish state as an evil country. And there are elements, whether in the UAE and all across the Arab world, that will always hold fast to the idea that Israel is not a good country, is the enemy of the region, and that it holds the keys to some of the most important Muslim sites in their Islamic theology. That's going to happen. That's always going to be there. The key is, how do these governments, whether in the UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, how does the young crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, at the ripe young age of 30, 35 tried to sideline the radical Islamic elements within his own country. Remember when President Trump went to Riyadh, being hosted by the young crown prince at the age of 35, he, since 2017, has gone on what some would say a monumental tectonic cultural shift in the royal kingdom. In the House of Saud, he has allowed women to drive. Some theaters have opened up. He's allowed various concerts to take place. Obviously, these are incremental, small incremental steps. But at the same time, how does he placate and sideline those radical Islamic elements within the country, and also to embrace peace with the Israelis?
Something you just hit on, kind of highlighting what happened in Saudi Arabia with the change in modernizing, if you will, with women allowed to drive and movie theaters opening. This is a very, very different region than it was just 3, 4, 5, a decade ago because of the tectonic shifts that we've been seeing. We're going to stand by for a moment because I understand the president is on his way out to the south lawn of the White House. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This event at the White House with about 700 guests from the administration, also delegations from UAE, Bahrain, and Israel. And here we have Melania Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, walking out with Sarah Netanyahu, the Prime Minister's wife of Israel, being seated there in the White House South Lawn.
John, I was just going to say, as we watch these pictures, for those who have been ardent detractors of this president and his White House, for him to pull off something like this, I'm reminded by the columnist for the New York Times, Bret Stephens, who has been a regular critic of the president. He had an op-ed in the New York Times earlier this month and said the following. He says, "A rare Middle East triumph, and yes, a triumph for Trump, too." The reality is, behind the scenes, the fact that this White House, with the help of Jared Kushner and all the other Middle East experts, were able to pull this off was quite dramatic.
All right, Trump, let's go to the White House as we hear the bugles playing.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, His Highness, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the United Arab Emirates, and the Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain.
Thank you very much. Please. Thank you. The First Lady and I are honored to welcome to the White House Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and Mrs. Netanyahu. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. And Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed, United Arab Emirates, UAE. Thank you very much. And Foreign Minister Abdulaziz Al Zani of Bahrain. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're here this afternoon to change the course of history. After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East. Thanks to the great courage of the leaders of these three countries, we take a major stride toward a future in which people of all faiths and backgrounds live together in peace and prosperity. In a few moments, these visionary leaders will sign the first two peace deals between Israel and the Arab state in more than a quarter century. In Israel's entire history, there have previously been only two such agreements. Now we have achieved two in a single month, and there are more to follow. Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain will establish embassies, exchange ambassadors, and begin to cooperate and work together so strongly to cooperate as partners across the broad range of sectors, from tourism to trade and healthcare to security. They're going to work together. They are friends. The Abraham Accords also opened the door for Muslims around the world to visit the historic sites in Israel and to peacefully pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the third holiest site in Islam. Together, these agreements will serve as the foundation for a comprehensive peace across the entire region, something which nobody thought was possible, certainly not in this day and age, maybe in many decades from now, but one founded on shared interests, mutual respect, and friendship. To our honored guests from Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, congratulations on this outstanding achievement. Congratulations. Fantastic. I also want to thank Vice President Mike Pence. Thank you, Mike. Great job. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mike, thank you very much. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. Robert, thank you. Mr. Jared Kushner. Jared, thank you very much. Ambassador Brian Hook. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you. Thank you. And Avi Berkowitz. Avi, thank you very much. I also want to give a very special thanks. He's been an incredible ambassador to Israel. David Friedman. That's a very great group of people, great group of patriots. They wanted this to happen so badly. They worked so hard. And again, nobody thought it could happen, and they thought it could happen. They never even doubted it. So I want to thank you all very much. Thank you. For generations, the people of the Middle East have been held back by old conflicts, hostilities, lies, treacheries. So many things held them back. Actually, lies that the Jews and Arabs were enemies and that Al-Aqsa Mosque was under attack. Constantly, they would say it was under attack. These lies, passed down from generation to generation, fueled a vicious cycle of terror and violence that spread across the region and all over the world. These agreements prove that the nations of the region are breaking free from the failed approaches of the past. Today's signing sets history on a new course, and there will be other countries very, very soon that will follow these great leaders. The people of the Middle East will no longer allow hatred of Israel to be fomented as an excuse for radicalism or extremism, so important. And they'll no longer allow the great destiny of their region to be denied. On my first foreign trip as president, I had the honor of addressing the leaders of more than 54 Arab and Muslim nations in Saudi Arabia. My message that day was very simple. I urged the nations of the Middle East to set aside their differences, unite against the common enemy of civilization, and work together toward the noble aims of security and prosperity. I offered America's friendship. I offered America's help. But I said clearly that the nations of the regions had to decide what kind of a future they wanted for their children and for their families and for their nation itself. No one could make that choice for them. They had to do that themselves. Today, the world sees that they're choosing cooperation over conflict, friendship over enmity, prosperity over poverty, and hope over despair. They are choosing a future in which Arabs and Israelis, Muslims, Jews, and Christians can live together, pray together, and dream together, side by side in harmony, community, and peace. Once again, let me congratulate the people of Israel, the people of the United Arab Emirates, and the people of the Kingdom of Bahrain. God bless you all. This is an incredible day for the world. This is a really wonderful and beautiful occasion. I want to thank all of the members of Congress for being here. Senators, congressmen, congresswomen, we just appreciate it so much. Everybody wanted to be here. It's a very important day for the world. It's a very important day for peace. Before the parties sign the accords, I'd like to ask Prime Minister Netanyahu to say a few words, followed by the Foreign Minister of the United Arab Emirates and the Foreign Minister of Bahrain. Thank you very much. It's a great honor. Thank you.
Our dear friend, President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, thank you for hosting me, my wife Sarah, and our entire delegation on this historic day. I want to recognize Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, National Security Advisor O'Brien, and other cabinet members, Jared Kushner, Avi Berkowitz, Ambassador Friedman, and other members of the President's able peace team, senators, members of Congress, Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer, his Emirate and Bahraini counterparts, as well as all the dignitaries gathered here on this sunny day. I want to also express my gratitude for all the Israelis who've worked for years, sometimes in less sunny climes, to bring this date, and I thank each and every one of you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, this day is a pivot of history. It heralds a new dawn of peace. For thousands of years, the Jewish people have prayed for peace. For decades, the Jewish state has prayed for peace. And this is why today we're filled with such profound gratitude. I am grateful to you, President Trump, for your decisive leadership. You have unequivocally stood by Israel's side. You have boldly confronted the tyrants of Tehran. You've proposed a realistic vision for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. And you have successfully brokered the historic peace that we are signing today, a peace that has broad support in Israel, in America, in the Middle East, indeed in the entire world. I am grateful to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates and to you, Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed. I thank you both for your wise leadership and for working with the United States and Israel to expand the circle of peace. I am grateful to King Hamad of Bahrain and to you, Foreign Minister Abdul Latif Al-Zayani, for joining us in bringing hope to all the children of Abraham. To all of Israel's friends in the Middle East, those who are with us today and those who will join us tomorrow, I say, Assalamu alaikum. Peace unto thee. Shalom. And you have heard from the President that he is already lining up more and more countries. This is unimaginable a few years ago, but with resolve, determination, a fresh look at the way peace is done, this is being achieved. Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, the people of Israel well know the price of war. I know the price of war. I was wounded in battle. A fellow soldier, a very close friend of mine, died in my arms. My brother Yoni lost his life while leading his soldiers to rescue hostages held by terrorists at Entebbe. My parents' grief over the loss of Yoni was unrelieved until their dying day. And over the years, when I've come to console the families of Israel's fallen soldiers and victims of terror, I have seen that same grief countless times. And this is why I am so deeply moved to be here today. For those who bear the wounds of war, cherish the blessings of peace. And the blessings of the peace we make today will be enormous. First, because this peace will eventually expand to include other Arab states, and ultimately, it can end the Arab-Israeli conflict once and for all. Second, because the great economic benefits of our partnership will be felt throughout our region, and they will reach every one of our citizens. And third, because this is not only a peace between leaders, it's a peace between peoples. Israelis, Emiratis, and Bahrainis are already embracing one another. We are eager to invest in a future of partnership, prosperity, and peace. We've already begun to cooperate on combating Corona, and I'm sure that together we can find solutions to many of the problems that afflict our region and beyond. So despite the many challenges and hardships that we all face, despite all that, let us pause for a moment to appreciate this remarkable day. Let us rise above any political divide. Let us put all cynicism aside. Let us feel, on this day, the pulse of history. For long after the pandemic is gone, the peace we make today will endure. Ladies and gentlemen, I have devoted my life to securing Israel's place among the nations to ensure the future of the one and only Jewish state. To accomplish that goal, I work to make Israel strong, very strong. For history has taught us that strength brings security, strength brings allies, and ultimately, and this is something President Trump has said again and again, ultimately, strength brings peace. King David expressed this basic truth thousands of years ago in our eternal capital, Jerusalem. His prayer, immortalized in the book of Psalms in the Bible, echoes from our glorious past and guides us towards a brilliant future. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom. May God give strength to his people. May God bless his people with peace. Mr. President, distinguished guests, this week is Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And what a blessing we bring to this new year. A blessing of friendship, a blessing of hope, a blessing of peace. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Highness, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the United Arab Emirates.
Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, and my friend Abdul Latif Zayani, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me start by conveying the best regards of the UAE people and the leadership, and especially of Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, to you, Mr. President, and everyone gathered here today. I'll continue my speech in Arabic, and I'm sure there will be translation to that. أقف اليوم أمد يد سلام وأستقبل يد سلام. نقول في ديننا الإسلامي: اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام. فالبحث عن السلم مبدأ أصيل، ولكن المبادئ تتحقق فعلا عندما تتحول إلى أفعال. وها نحن اليوم نشهد فعلا سوف يغير الشرق الأوسط وسيبعث الأمل حول العالم.
I stand here today to extend a hand of peace and receive a hand of peace. In our faith, we say, "O God, you are peace, and from you comes peace." The search for peace is an innate principle, yet principles are effectively realized when they are transformed into action. Today, we are already witnessing a change in the heart of the Middle East, a change that will send hope around the world.
لم تكن هذه المبادرة ممكنة لولا جهود فخامة الرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب وفريقه الذي سعى بجد وإخلاص لنصل إلى هنا. وهنا لابد لي أن أشير إلى صديقي وزير الخارجية مايك بومبيو، وصديقي جاريد كوشنر كبير مستشاري الرئيس الأمريكي، وكل المخلصين لمبدأ السلام في الولايات المتحدة الذين سعوا لتحقيق هذا الإنجاز الكبير. شكرا لكم.
This initiative would not have been possible without the efforts of His Excellency President Donald Trump and his team, who worked hard and sincerely for us all to reach here. Most notably, my counterpart, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Jared Kushner, Senior Advisor to the President of the United States, and all those who are genuine about the principle of peace in the United States, who have strived to realize this major achievement. Thank you.
دولة رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي بنجامين نتنياهو، شكرا لك على اختيارك السلام ووقف ضم الأراضي الفلسطينية، مما يعزز إرادتنا المجتمعة لتحقيق مستقبل أفضل للأجيال القادمة.
Your Excellency Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the State of Israel, thank you for choosing peace and for halting the annexation of Palestinian territories, a decision that reinforces our shared will to achieve a better future for generations to come.
سادة الحضور، نشهد اليوم فكرا جديدا سيخلق مسارا أفضل لمنطقة الشرق الأوسط، فمعاهدة السلام هذه تعد إنجازا تاريخيا لكل من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية ودولة إسرائيل ودولة الإمارات. لن يتوقف أثرها الإيجابي، بل إننا نؤمن بأن ثمارها ستنعكس على المنطقة بأسرها، فكل خيار غير السلام سيعني دمار وفقر ومعاناة إنسانية. إن هذه الرؤية الجديدة التي بدأت تتشكل باجتماعنا اليوم لمستقبل منطقة مليئة بالطاقات الشابة ليست شعاراً نرفعه من أجل مكاسب سياسية، فالجميع يتطلع إلى خلق مستقبل أكثر استقرار وازدهار.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing today a new trend that will create a better path for the Middle East. This peace accord, which is a historic achievement for the United States of America, the State of Israel and the United Arab Emirates will continue to have a positive impact, as we believe that its reverberations will be reflected on the entire region. Every option other than peace would signify destruction, poverty, and human suffering. This new vision, which is beginning to take shape as we meet today for the future of the region, full of youthful energy, is not a slogan that we raise for political gain, as everyone looks forward to creating a more stable, prosperous, and secure future.
في زمن يسود فيه العلم يتطلع شباب المنطقة ليكونوا جزءاً من هذا الحراك الإنساني. وكم يسعدنا أن تكون الإمارات جزءاً من قوة الدفع هذا نحو الاستقرار ونمو الطاقات البشرية في مقاربة حضارية جديدة تفتح أبواب الفرص على مصراعيها ليستفيد منها محبي السلام والازدهار والمستقبل. فمجتمعاتنا اليوم تمتلك مقومات التنمية الإنسانية الحديثة من بنية تحتية واقتصاد متين وإنجازات علمية تؤهلها للنهوض بمستقبل الشرق الأوسط.
At a time when science is prevailing, the region's youth are looking forward to taking part in this great humanitarian movement. We are pleased that the United Arab Emirates will be part of the momentum towards stability and the growth of human potential in a new civilized approach that opens wide the doors of opportunity for those who look forward towards peace, prosperity, and the future. Our societies today possess the foundation of modern human development, such as infrastructure, a solid economy, and scientific achievements that will enable them to advance the future of the Middle East.
تؤمن الإمارات بأن دور الولايات المتحدة في المنطقة الشرق الأوسط إيجابي، والدليل هذه المعاهدة التي نوقعها اليوم في البيت الأبيض، حيث ستظل في التاريخ الإنساني منارة مضيئة لكل محبي السلام. وبالنسبة لنا فإن هذه المعاهدة ستمكننا من الوقوف أكثر إلى جانب الشعب الفلسطيني وتحقيق آماله في دولة مستقلة ضمن منطقة مستقرة ومزدهرة. تأتي هذه المعاهدات العربية التي وقعت مع إسرائيل في العقود الماضية كخطوة ولبنة مهمة للمستقبل، حيث الهدف من هذه المعاهدات هو العمل نحو الاستقرار والتنمية.
The United Arab Emirates believes that the role of the United States in the Middle East is positive, and this belief is evidenced by the accord that we are signing today at the White House, for which you have taken the lead, and will remain a beacon in human history for all peace-loving people around the world. And as for us in the United Arab Emirates, this accord will enable us to continue to stand by the Palestinian people and realize their hopes for an independent state within a stable and prosperous region. This accord builds upon previous peace agreements signed by Arab nations with the State of Israel. The aim of all these treaties is to work towards stability and sustainable development.
هذه السنة صعبة على العالم الذي يعاني من تداعيات كورونا. عززت بلدي التزاماتها تجاه المبادئ الإنسانية التي أرساها مؤسس دولة الإمارات الشيخ زايد، الذي علمنا بأن وقوف جانب مع الآخر أي من كان هذا الشخص مهما كان انتمائه العرقي أو الديني هو واجب إنساني ومبدأ راسخ.
In this difficult year, when the world is suffering from the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic, my country, the United Arab Emirates, has reinforced its humanitarian commitments established by our nation's founding father, Sheikh Zayed, who taught us that standing with others, regardless of their religious or ethnic affiliation, is a humanitarian duty and a firm principle.
استطاعت بلدي أيضاً في هذه الظروف الصعبة أن تطلق مسبار إلى المريخ. إن مسبار الأمل في الحقيقة يمثل أمل بأن منطقتنا قادرة على النهوض والتقدم، إذ تبنت الحكومات والشعوب العلوم. وبعد أن أرسلت الإمارات رائد الفضاء هزاع المنصوري العام الماضي إلى محطة الفضاء الدولية وأطلقت محطة سلمية للطاقة النووية، جاءت هذه الاتفاقية لتفتح آفاق أوسع لسلام شامل في المنطقة.
During this difficult time, the United Arab Emirates, my country, was able to launch a probe to Mars. The HOPE probe indeed represents hope that our region is capable of advancement and progress if governments and people embrace science. After the United Arab Emirates sent astronaut Hazza al-Mansouri last year as the first Arab astronaut to reach the International Space Station and launched a peaceful nuclear power plant, this accord opened up prospects for a comprehensive peace in the region.
سادة الحضور، إن السلام يحتاج إلى شجاعة، وصناعة المستقبل تحتاج إلى معرفة، والنهوض بالأمم يحتاج إلى إخلاص ومثابرة. لقد أتينا اليوم لنقول للعالم إن هذا نهجنا، السلام مبدأنا، ومن كانت بدايته صحيحة ستكون إنجازاته مشرقة بإذن الله. شكرا جزيلا. Thank you, Mr. President.
Ladies and gentlemen, peace requires courage, and shaping the future requires knowledge. The advancement of nations requires sincerity and persistence. We have come today to tell the world that this is our approach and that peace is our guiding principle. Those who begin things in the right way will reap bright achievements with the grace of God. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
With grace of God, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain.
شكرا جزيلا. Thank you, Mr. President.
Ladies.
The First Lady, Prime Minister, Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today is a truly historic occasion, a moment of hope and opportunity for all the peoples of the Middle East, and in particular for the millions in our younger generations. The declaration supporting peace between the Kingdom of Bahrain and the State of Israel is an historic step on the road to genuine and lasting peace, security, and prosperity across the region, and for all who live there, regardless of religion, sect, ethnicity, or ideology. For too long, the Middle East has been set back by conflict and mistrust, causing untold destruction and thwarting the potential of generations of our best and brightest young people. Now, I'm convinced we have the opportunity to change that. Today's declaration was made possible by the vision, courage, and commitment of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, who, supported by the people of Bahrain, has protected, institutionalized, and enhanced Bahrain's centuries-old spirit of coexistence and harmony, and has the wisdom to recognize that genuine cooperation is the most effective means to achieve peace and to safeguard legitimate rights. Thank you, Your Majesty, for this vision of peace for the region based on trust, respect, and understanding between all faiths, races, and nations. To our brothers in the United Arab Emirates, I congratulate you on your own momentous peace accord being signed today with Israel. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed has shown great leadership and foresight to make peace possible and secure a brighter future for our region. For the State of Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu, we welcome and appreciate these steps from you and your government, recognizing that enduring peace and security is only possible through a genuine engagement that protects the rights and interests of countries and peoples in the region. In particular, I want to express my deep appreciation to President Donald Trump. And his administration. Mr. President, your statesmanship and tireless efforts have brought us here today and made peace a reality. And to Secretary Pompeo, Senior Advisor Jared Kushner, and Special Representative Avi Brikovitz, who have, and others, many others, who have carried out their mandates with dedication and skill. Ladies and gentlemen, today's agreement is an important first step, and it is now incumbent on us to work urgently and actively to bring about the lasting peace and security our peoples deserve. A just, comprehensive, and enduring two-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict will be the foundation, the bedrock of such peace. We have shown today that such a path is possible, even realistic. What was only dreamed of a few years ago is now achievable, and we can see before us a golden opportunity for peace, security, and prosperity for our region. Let us, together and with our international partners, waste no time in seizing it. Thank you.
the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and His Highness, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the United Arab Emirates, will sign a treaty of peace, diplomatic relations, and full normalization. They will each sign 3 copies, one in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. We kindly ask that all guests remain seated for the signing of the documents.
Can you be helpful here and tell me your money? Okay.
You do the same for me in Arabic.
I will.
So, which one is mine?
Thank you.
That one.
That would be easiest. It's easiest. Just do it like that.
26 years.
Can we flip them over or can we turn them up?
Folks, what you're watching there is a historic day at the White House where the leaders of Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain are sitting at the table along with the President of the United States, signing what has become known as the Abraham Accords, a peace deal, a historic peace deal between Israel and these 2 Arab nations, joining them, Egypt back in 1979, and 15 years later, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan signing this deal as well. The President of the United States just moments ago declaring that a new dawn of a new Middle East has come. We're here this afternoon to change the course of history, the President of the United States said. After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East as these 4 leaders got together that you just saw there at the White House and signing this important document. Well, folks, thank you so much for watching this special presentation of today's historic White House signing ceremony on the CBN News Channel. For all of this and all the day's headlines, you can go to our cbnnews.com website and all of our platforms. From George Thomas here in the headquarters of the Christian Broadcasting Network in Virginia Beach, Virginia, wish you a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
You've been watching special live coverage from the CBN News Channel. We now return you to scheduled programming already in progress.